To benefit beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Next, we will study the classic of filial piety from traditional culture. Today, we talk about the classic of filial piety. Tomorrow, and the day after that, we will discuss the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. Following that, we will then cover the precious garland of the Supreme Path. This particular schedule is basically set in stone now. Unless there are any issues, it absolutely will not change. So tomorrow, we will talk about the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. Today's content is relatively simple, just a few words, and will only take one class period. Earlier, we already discussed some significant parts of the classic of filial piety. There is the filial piety of the emperor, of the feudal lords, and also of high officials and esteemed scholars. Today is chapter 6, which specifically discusses commoners. According to the society at that particular time, commoners were generally considered ordinary people. Among the four social groups mentioned above, they were indeed the lowest, completely without any significant status. But are they really the lowest? There might have been people even lower, because at that time it was what we call a slave society. There might have been some slaves and people of even lower status. Later on it was called a feudal society. Of course, this particular term, commoners, is a designation given by later historians and scholars. In reality, there were indeed some very distinct hierarchical levels among them. There were different social classes and also different ranks within those classes. So these individuals, often referred to as commoners, they were actually the so-called ordinary people of that time. Because back then, it was mainly an agricultural country. They could have belonged to, commerce, labor, or agriculture. Perhaps animal husbandry as well. Animal husbandry could also be included. But most of them were probably crop farmers, people from agricultural regions. These individuals were commonly called commoners. Even today, in numerous countries all over the world, with the exception of a very few nations that do not possess significant agricultural production, many other major agricultural countries, such as India or China, including Thailand, for example, many places globally are indeed agricultural countries. Most people are actually what we call farmers or ordinary citizens. So what does filial piety look like for these people? In fact, the filial piety of these people might be a bit different from what we mentioned earlier. So this time, after we've studied the classic of filial piety, maybe everyone will have a new understanding. In the past, we used to think that filial piety was simply about whether children were truly filial and devoted to their parents. Whenever we encountered the profound word filial piety, everyone immediately thought it should only refer to children showing deep respect to their parents and elders, demonstrating genuine reverence and diligently serving them with care. Most people think of it as this kind of attitude and behavior. But in actual fact, according to the ancient and deeply ingrained concept of filial piety, as we have discussed earlier, the fundamental concept of filial piety truly differs for everyone, from the esteemed emperor at the very top to the common people at the very bottom. So the filial piety of common people that we're talking about today, actually, this idea holds a significant similarity to the deeply established concept of filial piety and showing respect to one's parents, the core meaning of which is quite straightforward. Therefore, I am confident that all of us present here are already very clear on this point, but even so, it is occasionally helpful to provide a brief, timely reminder. Or we can say it's necessary for us to learn together as well. Because truly living in this world, not to mention even all other people around us, even we Buddhists at times should truly broaden our perspectives and horizons. We should look at the entire world around us and diligently learn some valuable worldly knowledge. In fact, this doesn't necessarily pose a great obstacle to our spiritual practice. Moreover, in this current day and age, it is truly important that we deeply understand the fundamental rules and guiding principles of the world around us. We also need to diligently learn how to effectively interact with all sorts of worldly people and individuals. As we mentioned before, if you are someone like some of the great masters in ancient times, there were many in Han region as well, who spent their whole lives living in huts or caves, then in that case, it's entirely possible to be completely isolated from the world. In Tibet as well, some people spend their entire lives deep in the mountains and forests, or always staying hidden in some quiet, secluded caves, or perhaps wandering among the dense ancient woods, or perhaps remaining in small ancient temples for a long time. For such people, interacting with the world or learning worldly knowledge is truly unnecessary for them. But for ordinary Buddhists, it's quite possible that they will need to interact with worldly people and learn methods of dealing with others, conducting oneself in society and handling affairs, and even communicating and cooperating with others. At the very least, in these aspects, it's very important to fully understand the fundamental basic rules of this world. Otherwise, as I often say, for those who diligently study, deeply contemplate, and actively practice within a small circle, this particular way of life is very different from the way people live their lives outside. I myself have experienced this before. Here we feel that those who have spent over a decade studying, contemplating, and practicing are doing very well. Whether it's in exams or in conduct, they perform excellently. Then I thought, wow, this time there's an opportunity to go out and spread the Dharma. He should have done very well, but after going out, they themselves felt very upset, not knowing what they had actually learned. It seemed like they just couldn't get used to it. No one could get used to it. And the reactions from people outside weren't very positive either. Because perhaps he had been wholeheartedly focused on diligently studying and comprehending all these highly specialized Buddhist terms and profound knowledge, tirelessly engaging in study, contemplation, and practice day and night. But the outside world was not as he had really imagined. Moreover, the things people outside indeed say, maybe some of us here can't even understand them, not knowing what they're talking about. And the things some people here might say, people outside might not understand either. In this particular situation, let alone spreading the Dharma, we can't even stay here anymore. There's no room for our survival. So recently, as I've been studying the Vimalakirti Sutra, I personally feel that indeed, for a great many people, this is truly very necessary and quite essential. Yesterday, after I finished teaching, someone came up to me and said, maybe it was just to make me happy, so they said some nice things. Or perhaps it was something truly heartfelt. They genuinely said that the Vimalakirti Sutra is indeed very effective for us, truly helping us to rediscover the profound and essential principles of Buddhism. Indeed, perhaps we really do need something quite like this in our lives. Otherwise, the Buddhism most people currently perceive and understand might be somewhat different from the actual authentic Buddhist teachings. What do we think Buddhism is, but what is the true essence of Buddhism? There may be some significant gaps between these two distinct entities. So, why exactly do we study these worldly treatises? Sometimes it's really necessary. If in the future all the right conditions come together, I sincerely hope that we Buddhists can study some of the very latest sciences. By carefully comparing these new scientific and technological advances with some of the profound principles in Buddhism, and conducting research in this way, should one gain a truly comprehensive understanding of the many tenets of the Buddhist path, it may prove to be an exceptionally significant aid to one's spiritual cultivation and practice. Of course, if you haven't laid any foundation at all, and then you don't engage in study and contemplation, and you spend all day just looking at worldly things, you might end up becoming neither one thing nor the other. That's a real possibility. But from the ultimate point of view, because in this modern world we are truly living in an era where most people genuinely believe in science and technology, in this particular era, it is very much necessary for us to understand science, especially when we are trying to relate to others. And also, in the process of our own practice, we might very often indeed encounter wrong views that are in fact correspond to modern science. So at such times, in what way should we respond to, counteract against, or even subdue these discriminating thoughts? That's precisely why I just briefly mentioned this particular point. Today, I originally planned to finish this discussion in merely 10 minutes, but I honestly don't know how much I'll actually be able to comprehensively cover. So today the point is here, what is meant by the filial piety of common people? What exactly is the filial piety of common people? Follow the way of heaven, divide the benefits of the land, be prudent in conduct and frugal in use in order to support one's parents. This is the filial piety of common people. The principle here is relatively simple. It means following the laws of nature and dividing the benefits of the land as well as frequently acting in accordance with the established law and behaving cautiously and prudently and being frugal, that is to say, not being wasteful or excessively indulgent, and diligently using such behavior to provide for one's own beloved parents. This is what is really called the filial piety of common people. It seems very straightforward, so these just few points, we can look at them one by one. The previous behaviors mentioned, all of them are ways to support or show filial piety to one's parents. So you could say, this is the filial piety of common people. Or if we separate out the principles mentioned earlier, as a common person, from knowledge of astronomy and geography above, to the basic rules of the world below in everyday life. All these principles of the myriad things in the world need to be understood and grasped. And in our daily lives, we must truly learn to effectively apply them. So what does it mean to follow the way of heaven here? The way of heaven, as mentioned here, the so-called heaven also refers to nature, and Tao means the laws or principles. This means that in our vast and intricate world, there are actually many external, fundamental laws of nature, as well as internal, inherent laws governing our physical body and our conscious mind. The external laws of nature, in fact. In Buddhism, these profound principles are also called the law of dependent origination, or the inherent principle of all things. So what are these natural laws like? For instance, the cyclical progression of the 4 distinct seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. When examined across the entire span of the year, spring is inherently characterized by a gentle warmth, summer is defined by its intense, scorching heat, autumn provides a refreshing coolness, and winter invariably brings a bitter chill. There are distinct differences in the various solar terms, and within each individual solar term. For example, when seeds are sown during the spring, they then undergo a period of growth and development throughout the summer. By the time autumn arrives, the crops reach a state of full maturity and are ready for harvesting. And finally, the grains obtained during the winter can be stored, illustrating how each of the distinct seasons adheres to its own unique pattern. And these rules are actually a kind of... Our human bodies also have their own different rhythms or laws. The entire external natural world also has its own different laws. If we do not consistently follow these fundamental laws, if we do not actively act in accordance with their established sequence or the precise way they inherently operate, then in fact your own personal wishes and cherished desires will regrettably not be fully fulfilled. Therefore, first and foremost, as an ordinary person, it is very important to understand the laws of all things in the world. Mipham Rinpoche has a verse that says, "Learn valuable knowledge when you are still young, and tend to the cattle during the cold winter months. Plow the fields in spring." These 3 are the causes for fruitful results. Mipham Rinpoche also has a saying. Of course, this saying seems to have appeared in different proverbs before. Some of the wording is slightly different, but the meaning is the same. Gaining knowledge in childhood, nurturing the dairy cows during the winter, and sowing the seeds in the springtime, these are the 3 causes that lead to maturity. This means that when you are young, in childhood, you should study the relevant knowledge. Otherwise, when you are already old, it will be impossible for you to do so. Some people, when they are 50 or 60, start learning other languages, and that can be quite difficult indeed, including some Dharma friends here recently when taking talking exams in English or Japanese, for example. Many people start preparing to go back and study, but I think it might be a bit difficult. You should learn all kinds of knowledge in childhood. Otherwise, if you try now, your memory just isn't what it used to be, but your determination is still admirable. For example, take dairy cows in the summer. In winter, you feed and raise them with all kinds of grass. Otherwise, in spring, they might starve to death or lack the strength to go on. If they do not have sufficient strength, then you will not be able to get milk from them in the summer. This is also a kind of pattern. Most herders know that in winter, they try every possible way to raise their cows. That's how it is. And as for seeds, everyone knows that you have to sow them in the springtime. Actually, this is a mature cause. It's a law of nature. So here, when we talk about the way of heaven, it still follows a certain pattern. In the past, Mencius also said, timing, geographical advantage, and harmony among people. The concept of timing inherently refers to the natural world, and with the progression of each distinct season, there inevitably come various and unique circumstances. In this regard, perhaps like the Han Chinese classic, the Book of Changes, as well as traditional Chinese medicine's understanding of the body's functioning in relation to the four seasons, including spiritual practice and physical nourishment, all of these have many patterns and rules. That's the first point. The second is the advantage of the land, which is actually also called geographical advantage. The natural world that we all live in other words, the Earth itself. Actually, the Earth itself also has its own different patterns. Its geological composition varies significantly, and its elevations are quite different as well. Because of these notable differences in geology, elevation, and geographical location, the diverse array of crops that flourish upon the earth are also completely different, demonstrated by the fact that if, for example, certain seeds originating in the southern regions were to be transported to the northern territories, they would be incapable of surviving or thriving. This principle includes tree planting. Some trees that grow in low-lying areas can't survive in places with very high elevation. This is similar to tsampa, a staple food in the Tibetan region. I've previously consulted some sources that explain tsampa is made from roasted chinke flour, and this chinke possesses certain distinct characteristics that set it apart from other types of agricultural crops, including both rice and wheat. As far as I can recollect regarding chinke, its optimal cultivation range typically appears to be situated at elevations of 2,600 to 3,400 meters above sea level. Places like Luhuo are suitable, and so is our Buddhist academy here. If we were to plant some chinke in our courtyard, by the time autumn arrives, it simply won't be able to fully mature and bear its grain. In the end, it just becomes chinke grass. The grass itself, however, still grows quite well indeed. So, if you truly want to grow chinke in the academy and then eat tsampa, but you genuinely don't really understand astronomy or geography, then, regrettably, it's just not possible. If you try to grow chinke in the city of Chengdu, it won't work either. The altitude there is just too low. It's somewhere in between, like this situation. Tsampa, a food, is only found in Qinghai, Yunnan, and parts of Sichuan and Gansu. There is some tsampa in India, but that tsampa, I've heard it might not actually be the real tsampa we have in Tibetan regions now. Back when we went to India, a lot of people really wanted to eat tsampa. We went with His Holiness at that time, and there was an attendant. They said it was tsampa, but after we ate it, it didn't taste like tsampa at all, and the Lama was really upset. He sighed, "We'll never get to eat tsampa from Tibet again. How many months left?" Every single day he would count the days on his fingers, longing to eat tsampa and truly wanting to return. I'm not sure where I left off just now. Whether it's astronomy or geography, this is how geography is. Actually, from many perspectives, it's often said that there is a unity between heaven and humanity. Some people think that these natural laws don't matter. They believe that man can conquer nature, that humanity will definitely overcome all of nature. But that's simply not the case. We absolutely must follow the inherent ways of the natural world. If we truly don't act in accordance with its fundamental laws, many important things simply cannot be accomplished. In these respects, the ancients were truly very skillful and resourceful. Whether it was going out, handling affairs, or doing anything at all, they would observe the time of day, pay attention to the energies and channels in their own bodies, and so on. There are actually many methods of observation, but most people have learned very little about them. That's one aspect. Another important aspect is what he calls self-discipline and moderation in one's actions. This means that in addition to understanding the laws of astronomy and geography, we also truly need to cultivate genuine kindness deep within our hearts. On top of that, we must not go against the natural laws that govern ourselves as human beings. If you do not act in accordance with the typical patterns of human behavior, your mindset will also develop problems, and your body will suffer damage in various ways as well. For example, if you have already crossed this bottom line, if you commit all kinds of evil every day, then at a certain point it will be impossible for you to live freely in this world. That's why so many people are now locked up in prison. For instance, some people, after drinking alcoholic beverages, completely go beyond our natural inherent laws. If they kill, steal, and commit many truly evil deeds, because such destructive behavior has already crossed the basic, fundamental principles of being a human being, at that point you have no choice but to be punished. So, your body also needs to avoid indulgence frequently and regularly. You must act with great caution and careful consideration. There is a clear distinction here as well. And in the process of doing things, especially in daily life, there are also certain rules. You can't be too poor. If you are too poor, you won't even be able to meet your basic needs for survival. However, you must also avoid indulging in excessive extravagance and reckless, ostentatious wastefulness. In this way, from the perspective of karma, it actually depletes your merit and blessings. You end up using up a lot of your merit, and at a certain point, you may have to use your own body and mind to make up for the mistakes you've made. This is indeed a real possibility. Therefore, many ancient and truly great masters also placed great importance on this. No matter what we wear, eat, or use, it should only match the level of merit and blessings we have and be appropriate for us to use. Beyond that, we should not have excessive desires or force things. Live according to your own position and the blessings you have. Lead a very normal life. In this situation, you won't be especially wasteful. You should only enjoy the wealth that you rightfully possess. Nowadays, many people currently talk about the so-called moonlight clan, meaning that they typically spend their entire salary by the very end of each month. Even within our Larangar here, I've personally heard that some practitioners are also very much a part of the moonlight clan, spending all of their living expenses by the conclusion of the month. This is actually quite good. From the perspective of spiritual practice, being part of the moonlight clan and the daylight clan, do the daylight clan actually exist? Perhaps they do. This also represents a type of behavioral pattern we engage in. In any case, overall, the practice of filial piety, which encompasses supporting and nurturing one's parents and harmoniously accommodating their wishes and needs, is truly of paramount importance. Let me talk about this particular topic today as well. If someone truly understands the concept of karma, they should truly respect and support their parents. If you can't even be truly filial to your own parents, then it's really quite hard to say whether you can achieve any worldly merit or profound transcendental realization. Some people often think, my relationship with my parents has never been good since I came into this world, so they feel it doesn't matter. But even if I am spreading the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings elsewhere, or making truly great contributions to society, I honestly think that this is actually a very difficult endeavor, because regardless of whether your parents treat you well or not, from the perspective of personal character, one should have a sense of gratitude toward one's parents. If my parents truly hadn't raised me in this particular way, I couldn't possibly be the person I am today. In a guide to the words of my perfect teacher, when reflecting on the profound kindness and nurturing care of parents, it also discusses this important topic at considerable length. It meticulously explains the kindness of parents from 5 distinct and significant aspects. Moreover, the kindness of parents, truly according to Buddhist scriptures, from the perspective of Dharma, indeed surpasses all else. It can even be profoundly said that at certain significant times, it truly surpasses the revered Guru and even the enlightened Buddha. I can certainly talk about this in just a moment. Sometimes, although our beloved parents are not perfect saints, we can still make meaningful offerings to them. In the Abhidharmakosha, it is stated that even though they are not saints, one's guru, parents, the sick, and those who are the last one with karmic existence, making offerings to them brings boundless and immeasurable merit. Also, in the Han scripture Contemplation on the Mind Ground Sutra, it is mentioned that if a person wholeheartedly makes offerings to the Buddha and also diligently practices filial piety, that is to say, some people diligently make offerings to the Buddha while others diligently serve their own parents. For these 2 people, the merit is the same, and the rewards they receive throughout the 3 times are also endless. This means that the blessings received by these 2 people are not different at all. If one were to speak of all the Buddhas of the 3 times, their merits would be truly inexhaustible. The meaning is whether you make offerings to the Buddha or to your parents. In fact, the merit and the resulting blessings from both are the same. We might think, when I make offerings in front of the sacred statue of Shakyamuni Buddha, surely that must bring incomparable merit. But today, if I buy some delicious food and refreshing drink for my dear parents, then it seems like there's nothing special about that. What merit could there be? This elderly old lady is so incredibly naggy. She goes on and on, incessantly, every single day without any end. It's so utterly annoying. I don't have any freedom at all whatsoever. She absolutely has to control everything I do, what I eat, how I walk, even with all sorts of things like this and that. These are our parents. It's not just about them being controlling. We should understand her attentiveness and recognize that her compassion is genuinely heartfelt. Furthermore, the Contemplation on the Mind Ground Sutra also says that the father truly embodies loving kindness, and the mother embodies profound compassion, right? The immense kindness and virtue of both are actually very difficult to adequately repay. For this reason, the Buddha also went to the heaven of the 33 and taught the Dharma to his mother for 3 months. And when he returned to the human world, he also spoke a lot about the merits in this regard. That's also how the Labab Duchen came about. So we should truly understand the great kindness of our parents in these important respects. There is also the Infinite Life Sutra. In the commentary on the revered Infinite Life Sutra, there is a particularly insightful case story. As I can roughly recall the details of it from my memory, I would like to take this opportunity to share it. When the Buddha was in the world, there was once a severe famine in ancient India. Many people died, and the streets were filled with countless lifeless corpses. At that time, the Buddha, in the outward appearance of his practice, also went into the city to beg for alms. On the first day he got nothing at all, he received nothing. Then, on the second day, the Buddha once again went into the city to beg for alms, just as he had done before. He still did not get a single bite of food. When the third day finally came, the Buddha went again. Sometimes these profound stories really, the intense hunger and bitter cold that people in this world experience are truly things that should be deeply understood and genuinely felt. Even someone as incredibly dignified and majestically powerful as the Buddha, perhaps whether to go along with sentient beings or to demonstrate the suffering of the human world, he too went 3 days without eating. Finally, a bhikkhu saw this and felt especially saddened in his heart. He saw that the Buddha had not eaten for 3 days. He felt very unhappy, and he himself didn't really have much to offer either. Indeed, during that time of famine, it was truly pitiful. At that moment, he sold his 3 robes as a monk. After selling them, he bought a bowl of rice and joyfully offered it to the Buddha. When he was making the offering, the Buddha clearly knew. But he then asked him, "Where exactly did you get this particular item from? During such a severe famine, how exactly were you able to get a bowl of rice like this?" He replied, "I sold my 3 robes, and when I saw the Buddha, I offered it to you." Then the Buddha said, "I cannot accept this. These 3 robes are blessed by all the Buddhas of the 3 times as wondrous robes. The food obtained in this way, I truly cannot accept it. I am not worthy to receive it." At this moment, the bhikkhu said, "Buddha, you are the teacher of the 3 realms. You are the field of merit for all beings in the 3 realms. If you cannot accept this, then who in the world could possibly accept it?" He replied, "Then your parents should be able to. Your parents raised you with kindness as great as a mountain. You can give it to your parents." Then the Buddha gently asked, "Do your beloved parents truly possess faith?" He replied, "They do not have faith. If they do not have faith, on one hand, if you give this bowl of rice to them, perhaps they will feel joy because of it. Gradually, they may take refuge in the 3 jewels. This is the most meaningful outcome." Later, this bhikkhu, although somewhat reluctant, still followed the teachings and offered it to his own parents. From this story, we can clearly see that in some respects it is indeed true that parents surpass even the Buddha. Including some monastics, if they offer to their own parents a portion of what others have given them as offerings, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that particular approach. This principle is explained with remarkable clarity and precision in the Vinaya texts of the esteemed Sarvastivada school. So, after diligently studying the profound classic of filial piety this time around, as I mentioned the other day, if you happen to have parents yourself, you really should seriously consider changing your attitude in the future. because the time you have together with your parents will not last long. At a certain point in time, whether due to advancing age or declining health, for various reasons, they will inevitably depart. When they do eventually leave, at the very least, you certainly won't be left with any regrets. During your entire lifetime, you will have repaid their immense kindness to some extent. This is truly very important. Also, let me mention here, offering to your parents brings profound and significant great merit, not only in this present life, but also in countless future lives. There is also such a story in the Agama Sutras. It is said that there was a young Brahmin who once went out to the street to beg for alms. He then offered the food he had received to his own parents, then asked the Buddha, "Does making offerings to my parents in this way actually bring merit?" He asked the Buddha this question repeatedly. The Buddha in response addressed him in a beautiful verse saying, "If one properly honors and makes offerings to one's parents, one's good name will spread in this life, and after death one will be reborn in the heavens." He said, "Making offerings in this way truly brings you great and tremendous merit." What kind of merit is it? By making offerings to your parents like this. In this very life, your excellent reputation will spread widely in all directions. In your next life, you will certainly not fall into the lower realms. You will be reborn in a good realm and may even attain liberation. So, for those of us who are truly good to our beloved parents, it is a natural and undeniable law that even the powerful Dharma protectors and the celestial deities, they will often widely spread his good and virtuous name throughout the entire world. We often hear people say, "Oh, that person is especially good to his parents." In fact, nowadays, before many people get married, the other party often asks, "Is he good to his parents?" If others say, "He isn't good to his parents," "Oh, then our family doesn't want him." Otherwise, if they hear that he is fierce or harsh. I'm not sure if it's the same in Han regions, but in Tibetan areas we often ask about this. First, they ask whether the person is good looking, then about his family background, then about his character and how he is regarding karma and making choices between right and wrong. And then they ask, is he good to his parents, even if everything else is perfect? If they hear, "Oh, he's very well known, but he's not good to his parents at all," then the other party doesn't dare to accept him. They think, "Wow, when the time comes, we'll be living together in the same family every day, and that's definitely not okay." They're very afraid and don't dare to accept it. This is also a kind of, maybe in life, if you are good to your parents, then things like reputation and good fortune will come to you naturally. And in the next life, that's even more certain. So right now, toward our parents, the main purpose of discussing the classic of filial piety this time is that many of us, if we can change our attitude toward our parents. Of course, I also hope that some parents won't be too arrogant, thinking, "Wow, I'm no different from the Buddha, so in the future I can order my children around." I'm exactly the same as the Buddha. If you develop arrogance like this every day and consistently mistreat your own children, in actual fact, sometimes parents really aren't very good or kind to their children. If you continue acting in this particular manner, it might not be a good thing. But overall, repaying the kindness of one's parents is indeed very important. There is a sutra called the Sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness, as spoken by the Buddha. The sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness was translated by Anshigao, and it's not very long. Then, regarding the sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness, many great masters consider it to be an apocryphal sutra. I don't dare to say, I've only glanced at it. The earliest time I encountered it was 20 or 30 years ago. I received this Dharma text back then, but indeed later on, including both Master Lianchi and Master Jinkong, they both, in Master Lianchi's 3 essays from the bamboo window, he also says that the sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness is an apocryphal sutra. It doesn't say much in it, and there are not really very strong reasons. Master Jinkong said that his teacher, Mr. Li Bingnan, told him not to read it. But in the past, I also searched for it in Tibetan texts. In Tibetan, there is one called the Sutra of Parents. In the Tibetan Tripitaka, there is a Sutra of Parents. But the sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness is a bit different from this one, because the sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness was translated by An Shigao. That one is very short, just a little bit, and its general content seems to be about this: carrying your father on your right shoulder and your mother on your left shoulder, serving them faithfully for 1,000 long years, even having much of their utterly unclean and foul excrement spilled directly on yourself for thousands of years. In reality, you still cannot repay their kindness. It talks about this aspect. But it's a bit different from the Tibetan Sutra on parents. In the Tripitaka, it might have a bit more than the Sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness, with some differences in the storyline. In any case, the sutra on the difficulty of repaying parents' kindness, perhaps according to some great masters of the past, they have this view. Whether it is an apocryphal sutra or a genuine one, the real difference is actually not so easy to distinguish, so we shouldn't bother trying to judge it. Because nowadays some people, based on their own discriminating thoughts, use all sorts of reasons to say, this must be an apocryphal sutra, especially some scholars nowadays, even when it comes to authentic Buddhist scriptures. They also express their own opinions, which aren't really, because they themselves have never really studied Buddhist philosophy, for example, the Abhisamaya-lankara, Madhyamaka, or Hetu-vidya treatises. If they haven't studied any of these, they're just using worldly theories to make judgments. This approach is indeed quite difficult to stand up to scrutiny, so there's really no need for us to engage in refutation or making choices about it. But in fact, there are many passages in the Buddhist scriptures that say repaying the kindness and virtue of one's parents is an extremely great merit. Repaying kindness, especially in the preliminary practices, has also been discussed before. If we can truly help both our beloved parents to take proper refuge and diligently practice the sacred Dharma, then the spiritual merit gained is even greater. In the specific case we just discussed and explored, the Buddha also clearly said, if your parents do not have faith, helping them to develop faith and take refuge in the three jewels brings great merit. There is a sutra called the Sutra Spoken by Bodhisattva in Conceivable Light, which also says that guiding one's parents toward the true Dharma brings even greater merit. Neither food nor treasures can truly repay the kindness of one's parents. It is not by offering food or treasures that we truly repay our parents' kindness. So what is the most important way? Guiding them toward the true Dharma is the true offering to one's parents. If they truly take refuge in the true Dharma, and you help them take refuge and receive precepts under the three jewels, then this is the best offering, the best way to repay them. Therefore, sometimes, while we should be filial to our parents, or when we talk about being good to our parents, most people think that, giving your parents a better place to live, and ensuring they have no worries about food or clothing, allowing them to enjoy a wonderful old age, this is what most people in the world truly think. But if someone is wise, they will not only consider their beloved parents' well-being in this present life, but more importantly, their well-being in life after life. If you can help them practice well, this is truly the very best way. Therefore, sometimes, if all the right conditions are present for your parents, let them take the lay precepts in their later years, and if there are indeed lay Buddhist centers available in the area, let them actively engage in study and contemplation there. In some of the lay Buddhist centers in my hometown, there are also many elderly people. When it comes to many elderly people, honestly, I feel that running schools and establishing Buddhist institutes is on one hand very good. But when building schools, it truly seems that these young people, you don't really know what they will ultimately become when they grow up and mature. Even when establishing Buddhist institutes, some young lamas and monastics who are still developing and learning, on the one hand, they might go on to widely spread the Dharma, but sometimes it truly feels like, for example, they really don't cherish their blessings when they are eating and when reciting scriptures. They don't do it properly and just play on their phones instead. There are many things I find hard to accept. Because I have rather strong wrong views, I often think, oh dear, I work so hard to serve them. But in the end, will they really be meaningful for the Dharma and sentient beings in the future? But I have great confidence in some of the elderly lay practitioners' communities, because it seems that over the course of their lives, they've already experienced just about everything. And when they reach old age, they practice with great sincerity. Not long ago, a lay practitioner passed away, and at the very moment of their passing, This is something I personally heard. I didn't directly ask that particular Khenpo. But that day, some people told me about it like this. The Khenpo was teaching them the aspiration of Sukhavati, and at the end of the teaching, life is impermanent, and today this Dharma teaching has been completed perfectly. In the future, by relying on various methods, one will surely be reborn in the Pure Land of ultimate bliss. But life is impermanent. You never know when you might die, even right at the doorstep. Later, there was a lay practitioner who really did pass away right at the doorstep, but their family was also very content. They felt that after so many years of practicing there continuously, if one were to die just after the aspiration of Sukhavati had finished, perhaps they truly were reborn in the pure land of ultimate bliss. So I think when it comes to our own parents, on one hand, as I mentioned a couple of days ago, give them a call, stay in touch, and offer them some comfort. If you have money, please consider giving them some. If you genuinely don't have money, then at least say some kind words to them. Actually, there's not much difference between elderly people and young children. You can coax them a little, and they'll cheer up right away. Even this kind of temporary happiness is good. But more importantly, because their precious time in this fleeting world is truly limited, at this crucial stage, even just devoutly reciting the sacred names of the three jewels is profoundly good. If they can chant Amitabha Buddha's name more or recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra, that is the most meaningful thing. This is from the perspective of a Buddhist. Since I myself am a Buddhist, this is my value system. Of course, some of you here who are listening to the classic of filial piety, there are people from different cultural backgrounds here. If you feel, wow, that's not how it should be, and think that with elderly people, the best thing is to give them massages all day long, or that making a better coffin for them when the time comes is the best thing. Everyone has different ideas. If you think this way, I also admire that. Everything that exists in this world is in fact reasonable. Even behaviors that are very improper are, in a way, reasonable. Because for you, this is truly the only choice in your entire life. For example, some people actually do things that are quite excessive, but for themselves it might potentially be the very best choice they could make, because ultimately it's their own choice, their own significant decision. Each of us loves ourselves, and if we love ourselves, then surely we make the best choice for ourselves. So sometimes we can understand it this way, but in the end, it's still about being filial to our parents. You can also think of it this way. This is the filial piety of common people. The filial piety of common people is like this. Next, let's talk about this. Therefore, from the Son of Heaven down to the common people, filial piety has no beginning or end, and there has never been a case where one worries about not being able to fulfill it. In the end, there is a summary. In short, we have already discussed 5 different types of filial piety. From the Son of Heaven to the feudal lords, high officials, scholars, and now to the common people. So these 5 different types of filial piety. In fact, filial piety is truly everywhere. It has neither a definite beginning nor an absolute end. It always exists, and its overall scope is quite broad. It's not as we typically imagine it to be. This filial piety, regardless of your status. According to what is precisely described here, it is truly present everywhere indeed. And as for worrying about not being able to fulfill it, if we are anxious about gains and losses, thinking that I simply can't be filial, that I can't manage to do it, that's completely unnecessary. Everyone should have the opportunity. If your parents are no longer here, then you can use what was mentioned earlier, what we call the right time, the right place, and the right people, to continue to follow such a natural law. As long as you don't go against the established rules of the world yourself, then that in itself is also very good. Actually, this principle is really important, and I want to emphasize that. It's also very important, indeed, when we Buddhists perform life release ceremonies. When releasing animals, nowadays many people don't observe carefully enough. For example, directly releasing freshwater fish into unsuitable non-freshwater environments, or releasing domesticated birds into the wild. There are so many unfortunate cases like this. Such actions, which show a lack of understanding of natural laws, are really not good. This also applies to when we plant vegetation. I've seen many of our Dharma friends planting trees these past few days. But with some of the trees, it's clear they won't survive, just by looking at the holes dug for them. The requirement is that the holes should be about 60 centimeters deep, but when I look, I see that the holes they've dug are actually very, very shallow. Generally speaking, pine trees grow on shady slopes, while cypress trees grow on sunny slopes. There really is actually a clear difference between yin and yang aspects, if you want to be strict about it. I see that all the numerous trees in the Ziking Mountain Valley have already completely died. Sometimes a significant number of individuals among us, this might not have been directly done by our construction team, but I notice that sometimes when some of you are going to do it privately, it could be that you water the trees when the weather is extremely hot, for example. I notice that some people around me don't know how to care for or grow flowers. Sometimes it's a bit heartbreaking. Some people water them every single day, constantly. But for some flowers, watering once a week is actually enough. I saw an old monk who would carry a lot of water every day and keep watering the plants. But like that, the flowers can't take it either, and in the end, they drown. So we need to understand the laws of nature. Actually, it's the same for people too. Some people take medicine every single day. Taking medicine. Well, taking medicine is a good thing. They take Chinese medicine, Western medicine, even Tibetan medicine. But in the end, it still doesn't work, and their illness just gets worse and worse. So sometimes we really do need a certain kind of wisdom. This kind of wisdom is truly useful, whether you apply it to yourself or not. Sometimes I'm not very wise either. I just drank a bit of cold yogurt just now. Now I feel a little better. Just now I was desperately drinking hot water. I'm still drinking some now, otherwise I wouldn't be fully recovered yet. After my surgery last year, I had a lot of problems. And if I'm not truly careful with myself, then sometimes I just forget. Sometimes I simply get careless, things like that. Actually, each and every one of our physical bodies is really quite unreliable. There's truly no real sense of trust in it whatsoever. I think our entire external world is precisely the same way, but after all, we truly live in this particular kind of world. Whether it's releasing animals or carefully planting things, especially this year, our institute has planted quite a significant number of trees indeed. But I'm truly worried, seeing that some of us don't study at all and don't properly know how to take care of them at all. They just do whatever they want, however they like, without careful thinking. Actually, when it comes to planting trees, in real tree planting knowledge, indeed, some people say this: it's fine. You really don't need to dig very deep at all for this tree. Its roots won't go deep down into the soil anyway. They'll just grow sideways, so it's really no problem at all. There are also such opinions being expressed. For some, there's no way for water to accumulate in the middle at all. Some people do things like that. Anyway, there are all kinds of approaches. Strictly speaking, you should first loosen the soil, then step on it inside. There are a lot of these kinds of common sense things, but I don't really need to go into all of them. In short, sometimes when it comes to the laws of nature, and then the laws that apply to us as people, in Buddhism, this is called precepts. The laws that apply to people are called precepts. You still need to understand these aspects. This is what filial piety is. If you genuinely don't know what filial piety truly is, actually, it's quite literally everywhere around us. You don't need to think, maybe I don't have the chance. Don't think that way, even if you just care for a flower or plant a tree. Back when I was in middle school, more than 30 years ago, I think it was our graduating class or something, we planted trees by the river at our school. Later, our middle school was demolished. It was gone. It completely disappeared. A few years ago, I went back, and some of my classmates said, the numerous trees that I personally planted, along with a few others carefully placed by some of my diligent classmates, have now matured and grown exceptionally well. Back then, when we first planted them, because in the summer it was especially cool and very nice there, the trees were lush and thriving, growing really well. Some of our classmates from middle school are still teaching there. A few of us were there, and maybe at that time it was a kind of, because we were very young then, we called them trees of life and just planted them. But indeed, some of those magnificent trees, even after many decades, still continue to grow and flourish. We look at different places across the globe, whether it's going to India or to Shenzhen or to the United States. Many people in the world, including some leaders and celebrities, have also planted many trees. In the past, when His Holiness went with us to a botanical garden in Shenzhen, at that time there were many famous people, but they have already passed away. But the trees are still there. This too follows a certain natural law of nature, I suppose. We Tibetan people have a way of observing dependent origination. If the tree grows well, it means that person's life has hope. If the tree doesn't grow as expected, it might indicate some significant obstacles in their life's journey. But I think there's really no need to be attached to this. Sometimes, though, I seem to get attached to it naturally myself. There's a cypress tree in front of my window. One year it seemed like all its leaves outside turned yellow. I thought to myself, maybe I won't make it through this year either. So I quickly donated some money to recited prayers. Later, a lama from our monastery, who often practices his meditations among the towering cypress trees, told me, "This is nothing to be concerned about. Cypress trees shed their leaves every year. The old leaves fall off and new ones grow again." After a while, I looked again and then realized, oh, it really is like that. So sometimes when we truly lack skill or simply don't understand the intricate patterns of various plants, in fact, they inherently have their own specific rules. Recently, I observed a botanist, a foreigner actually, a 104-year-old biography. He really has been researching for over 70 years. In those 70 plus years, he has always carefully studied all kinds of different plants in diverse environments. Sometimes human knowledge is actually quite necessary indeed. Here, true botanists and zoologists, if you look at the West now, especially on the African savanna, there are people who dedicate their entire lives to studying animals. Some are wild animals. When you watch certain documentaries, you see, wow, their dedication is truly admirable. Does it have value and meaning? Judging from famous sayings, it should be worthwhile. It's better than doing nothing with your whole life. When I leave this world, aside from having eaten a lot of tsampa, there's a saying in Tibetan regions. Apart from eating tsampa, if you come into this world and do nothing else, there is such a saying. So compared to that, whether it's extensive research on various plants, astronomy, or the field of geography or biology, or even the study of diverse animals, including research on humanity, of course, I think the highest level is our deeper research into the human mind is even more truly important. Moreover, our mind will continue on, life after life, in an unending cycle. If we can conduct truly good and thorough research on this profound subject, perhaps it will be highly relevant to many people, both in this present life and the next. Otherwise, it seems that some individuals live just to struggle endlessly until their eventual death. But if some people understand the existence of future lives, then it's not just about death. Beyond physical death, after one's passing, there is a truly beautiful and radiant light. This is also a kind of goal to actively strive for, a distinctly different vision. Ultimately, it all truly depends on each individual person's unique situation. We've just successfully reached the 1-hour mark, which is pretty good. All right then, I will conclude my presentation here. Thank you very much for listening.
Sonam dei tamse rubaya tonne de jama pase kirgana jirano chupai chupun sonen droa droa
ma bandangara badna Sodargye ma bandangara badna Sodargye Bandangara Badma Sodargye